Iran often appears in the headlines as a country surrounded by wars and political tensions, but the scriptures reveal something far deeper. Even before it was called Iran, ancient Persia was already recorded in biblical prophecies as a key piece in Israel's destiny. This is not just ancient history, it is a living mystery that spans the centuries. Biblical stories show that this empire not only freed the Jews from captivity, but is also mentioned in Ezekiel's apocalyptic visions of the last days. What once seemed like coincidence is, in fact, the exact fulfillment of Scripture. Iran is not just newspaper news, it is part of prophecy. Imagine an empire that seemed forgotten, re-emerging as a shadow on the prophetic horizon. What we're about to reveal will change the way you see Iran, the prophecies, and even current events. The scriptures hide secrets that are only now beginning to be understood. If you love uncovering the truths of Scripture, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss new videos. Thank you so much for being here. The name of Persia echoes through the scriptures like a distant thunder rolling across the centuries. It wasn't just one more empire among many, but an actor chosen by God himself to fulfill prophecies. When we open the pages of the Bible and encounter ancient Persia, we realize this isn't just history, it's a divine script in motion. Biblical prophecies had already foretold the role of this nation. Isaiah and Daniel mentioned Persia before its rise, as if heaven had unveiled a tightly guarded secret. For the Jewish exiles, hearing this name in Scripture was like lighting a flame of hope. God had already written the deliverance before the captivity had even ended. This reveals how biblical narratives show God's absolute control over nations and kings. Persia, which to many was just a foreign power, became an instrument of redemption. A conquering empire became a liberator, a paradox only divine providence can explain. It's a reminder that even what seems like the enemy can be used in our favor. When we look at modern Iran, heir to ancient Persia, we see that this land still holds a central place in prophecy. It's no coincidence that it remains prominent in both the news and the scriptures. This raises an inevitable question. Could the secrets revealed to the prophets still be unfolding, awaiting the appointed time to be fulfilled? After the flood, the scriptures in Genesis 10:2 mention Madai, a descendant of Japheth, son of Noah. From this lineage came the Medes, direct ancestors of the people who inhabited the region of present-day Iran. What many see as merely a genealogical list, the Bible reveals as the beginning of a prophetic plan. Each name written carries a destiny designed by the Creator. From the Medes and Persians sprang nations with common roots, but identities that would expand in remarkable ways. A simple name in Genesis would grow into empires that would stand at the center of biblical narratives. If Scripture records it, it's no accident. It's because God had already assigned a role in humanity's prophetic storyline. In the ancient Near East, their lands became more than political boundaries. They were like a boiling cauldron where languages, cultures, and beliefs intertwined. In this setting, the Medes and Persians stood out not only for their military strength, but also for their cultural and spiritual influence. Prophecy follows the movements of peoples, and their path crossed directly with Israel. Understanding these origins allows us to see how the thread of history is woven from Genesis to Daniel, Esther, and Ezekiel. Nothing happened by chance. Each generation was preparing the ground for greater events. The Persian people did not merely emerge from history, but as a piece on a divine chessboard where every move fulfilled the scriptures. And that chessboard was just beginning to shift. Under the leadership of Cyrus the Great, the Medes and Persians united, giving rise to the powerful Achaemenid Empire. This was not just a political achievement, it was the fulfillment of prophecies already foretold in Scripture. Daniel 2 and Daniel 8 describe the Medo-Persian dominion, showing that the Bible does not record empires by chance. Each one carries a prophetic destiny. Persia's expansion was colossal. From the Indus River to Egypt, a vast shadow stretched over peoples, languages, and cultures. What appeared to be mere human conquest was, in reality, the unfolding of biblical stories. The borders Cyrus crossed were like the lines of a prophecy being drawn on the map of the world. Daniel saw this empire symbolized as the bear in Daniel 7, or the ram with two horns in Daniel 8. The visions were clear. Persia would play a central role in the sequence of kingdoms that would shape history. It was confirmation that the scriptures were alive, narrating the future before men even called it the present. Cyrus, unknowingly, became a tool in the hand of the Creator. The same king who expanded territories was also the instrument for liberating the people of Israel. His rise was not merely a military triumph, but proof that even kings and empires bow before the divine plan. And Cyrus's next move would reveal this in an even more astonishing way. In 539 BC, the fall of Babylon thundered through biblical history. The empire that had destroyed Jerusalem crumbled before Persia, and Cyrus the Great emerged as the protagonist of a story written long before. This wasn't just politics or conquest, it was the invisible hand of God moving pieces on the board of prophecy. The Book of Ezra records Cyrus's decree, allowing the Jews to return to Jerusalem and rebuild the temple. Ezra 1:1-4. An unthinkable act, a foreign king funding the restoration of worship to the God of Israel. The scriptures show that when God decides to fulfill his promises, even the hearts of kings bow before him. Isaiah, centuries earlier, had already written Cyrus's name, Isaiah 44:28, 45:1. Called the Anointed of the Lord, he was placed alongside leaders chosen by God himself. Imagine the impact of that. A pagan ruler described in prophecy as an essential piece of redemption. The Bible doesn't get names wrong. If Cyrus was mentioned, it's because his mission was already sealed. This revelation opens our eyes to the depth of the scriptures. They're not just ancient accounts, but living records of how God directs history. If he used a Persian king to free his people, who can doubt that he continues to act behind the scenes of nations? And the next chapter would once again place Persia on the stage of divine providence. During the reign of Xerxes, or Ahasuerus, Persia became the stage for one of the most impactful stories in the Bible. Haman, consumed by hatred, managed to decree the extermination of the Jewish people. The scriptures show that, at that moment, Israel seemed condemned to eternal silence. The most powerful empire of the time was making way for a tragedy that would echo for generations. Esther, a young Jewish woman who became queen, stepped onto the scene as a prophetic response. Her position in the palace was no coincidence, but divine providence. By risking her own life before the king without being summoned, she demonstrated that faith and courage can break through human protocols. It was as if God had hidden his strategy within the heart of the queen. The outcome changed history. Haman's plan collapsed, Israel was preserved, and the deliverance came to be celebrated every year at the Feast of Purim. The scriptures reveal that it was not merely politics or chance, but the hand of God preserving his people within the Persian court. Even in the heart of a foreign empire, providence asserted itself as destiny. Esther teaches us that prophecy is not confined to the past. It is fulfilled when men and women rise up in faith. The stage was Persian, but the author of the story was the Lord. And in Daniel's visions, Persia would be remembered once again, this time as part of the prophetic line that would lead the world to even greater events. Daniel's visions reveal that Persia was not merely another empire, but an essential part of the prophetic timeline drawn by God. In Daniel 2, the prophet interprets the statue from Nebuchadnezzar's dream. The chest and arms of silver represented the Medo-Persian dominion. The scriptures show that each metal symbolized an empire, and silver carried the shine of Persia in its rise. In Daniel 7, another vision reinforces this destiny. The bear, the second beast among four, symbolized the duality of the Medes and Persians. A heavy beast tilted to one side with 3 ribs between its teeth. It was not merely symbolic imagery, but prophecy about the unequal and devastating power of this empire that would crush entire peoples in its path. Daniel 8 brings even more detail. A ram with 2 horns, clearly identified as the kings of Media and Persia, is defeated by the goat of Greece. This prophetic scene foretold centuries of history before they happened. Persia's rise, its peak, and its fall before Alexander the Great. The scriptures do not merely narrate, they anticipate with precision the movement of empires. These visions reveal that Persia is not in the biblical narrative by accident, but as a central part of God's prophetic clock. Each empire was a link in the chain guiding humanity toward the end times. If Daniel saw so clearly both the past and future of Persia, what more might be reserved for this people in the Creator's plans? Even after being defeated by Greece, Persia left a trail that spanned centuries. Its system of satraps, regional governors, became a model for empires that followed. The scriptures remind us that the power of an empire does not end with the fall of its walls, but remains in the structures that shape peoples and biblical histories. The Persian legacy was like invisible roots sustaining future trees. The Magi who visited Jesus in Matthew 2 are, according to many scholars, the fruit of this heritage. Coming from the east, guided by signs in the heavens, they carried traditions linked to ancient Persia, renowned for its astrology and omens. The scene of the Magi kneeling before the Messiah is a distant echo of centuries of Eastern wisdom, connecting ancient prophecies to their fulfillment in the New Testament. Persian religious tolerance also left a mark on the world. By allowing peoples to keep their faith, they created space for Judaism to survive and later for Christianity to flourish. This policy was like fertile soil watered by divine providence, preparing the way for the message that would change humanity. What seemed like simple politics was, in truth, the fulfillment of Scripture. The post-Persian Empire teaches us that true influence does not lie in the sword alone, but in what endures. Laws, customs, and even spiritual traditions were born from its hand. If even at Jesus' birth we find Persian echoes, it is a sign that prophecy still holds secrets about this people. And in Ezekiel's writings, Persia would appear once more, this time on an even grander stage. The scriptures in Ezekiel 38 and 39 project Persia beyond ancient history, placing it on the stage of the end times. There, it appears as part of a coalition led by Gog against Israel. The text is clear. Nations would rise together to attack the people of God, and among them would be Persia. A prophecy written over 2 millennia ago, yet still echoing in our time. When we look at modern Iran, heir to ancient Persia, the connection becomes intriguing. It is not merely a country prominent on the geopolitical stage, but a nation mentioned in biblical prophecy. The fact that its name appears in Ezekiel shows that God had already recorded its eschatological role in the scriptures. What the world sees as politics, the Bible reveals as prophecy. This involvement does not mean Iran controls the future, but that even its position is under divine sovereignty. The Lord of history has already declared what is to come, that even the greatest alliances against Israel will not prevail. It is as if Persia, both then and now, is remembered as a piece on the prophetic chessboard, not the master of the game, but used to reveal the power of God. The biblical stories remind us that no nation escapes the rule of the Creator. Empires rise, empires fall, but the divine plan remains unshaken. If Persia was used in the past to restore Israel and will reappear in future apocalyptic scenarios, one inevitable question remains. How will God still use today's nations to fulfill his final prophecies? Prophecy has shown us that Persia, known today as Iran, has never been outside of the divine chessboard. From Cyrus to Ezekiel, from biblical stories to current geopolitics, we see that God writes history with lines we often don't understand. But the question is, have you been noticing God's signs in your own life? Have you been trusting more in the news and in human empires than in the scriptures that never fail? How many times do the prophecies warn us, and yet we close our eyes to the signs around us? Maybe it's time to reflect. If God controls nations and kings, how could he not also guide the course of your personal story? I want to challenge you to leave this video with a decision, not just to watch, but to apply. Read the scriptures carefully. Seek to understand the biblical stories as guides for the present, and allow your faith to be renewed by the certainty that nothing escapes the Creator's plan. Now I want to hear from you. What impacted you the most in this video? Leave your thoughts in the comments, like and subscribe to the channel. Turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next revelations. May this journey through prophecy awaken new questions, new answers, and above all, a new way of seeing your own life. And may God bless you powerfully, guiding every step on his eternal path.